The views expressed on Skeptically Speaking do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the University of Alberta, the Students' Union, or CJSR.
Hello and welcome to Skeptically Speaking. I'm your host, Desiree Schell. We'll be speaking today with Australian educators Dr. Martin Bridgstock and Kylie Sturgess about their new research into paranormal belief. They've come to some surprising conclusions that may just change the way you look at belief and believers. But there have been some developments elsewhere in the Commonwealth. I'm going to read a letter from Steve Toms, editor of the Canadian skeptical blog, skepticnorth.com. Over the past month, the Skeptic North team has been covering the amendment to Bill 179 in the Ontario legislature. The bill was intended to expand scope of practice to healthcare providers, such as nurses, pharmacists, and radiologists. But a last-minute amendment allowed for naturopaths to have the right to prescribe medication. As a science advocacy group, we felt that it was important to ensure that the contents of the bill were science-based and that it adequately considered public safety. Our concerns with this amendment surrounded the issues of quality control, government transparency, and adequate science-based training. Though the bill itself passed, two positive outcomes nonetheless emerged. Firstly, the issue saw national headlines despite relatively little overall attention from the mainstream media. This might not have occurred without the activity of the science-based community. Secondly, because this issue did make the headlines, we can be reasonably certain that this issue is, to some degree, in the public consciousness, and maybe some good will come of that in the long run. Our main goals were harm reduction, public safety, ensuring continued quality control in healthcare, and to make sure that some of the concerns of science-minded Canadians are known to the government. It was because of much support from outside organizations and individuals that we were able to meet some of those goals, and for that we extend our sincerest thanks. We will continue striving to make Skeptic North an active, positive force for science in Canada. If Skeptic North succeeds, it is because of the continued support and action from the science community. For further information and contact information, visit skepticnorth.com. Thanks, everyone, at Skeptic North, and do keep checking the blog for more information on where similar bills may be introduced next. And I'd also briefly like to say congratulations to intern Ryan, as he was recently elected chair of the Greater Edmonton Skeptic Society. I expect great things. And on to Speaking Up. Today we have Richard Stelling on the line, all the way from Bristol, UK. Richard is a serial entrepreneur, technology blogger, and all-round science enthusiast who is currently head of technology at Nix Digital, a mobile app startup. He's also the co-founder of the Bristol Skeptics. Thanks for being on Skeptically Speaking, Richard.
Thanks, Desiree. Thanks for having me.
So tell us about the Skeptics Exchange.
Okay, Skeptic Exchange is knowledge exchange, really. I wanted to start it because the thing I loved about the skeptic community when I got involved was the podcasts and the blogs where people would answer questions. The SGU do it occasionally. Skeptoid occasionally do a student show, and I wanted somewhere where people could go and ask questions and get decent answers. So that's why I started Skeptics Exchange.
So how does the site work?
Okay, so it's based on a reputation system. Anyone can go along, join up. It's free. You can enter as much or as little detail as you want to. And then you can instantly access, answer, ask questions. And if people in the community like those answers, they can vote them up or they can vote them down if they're not very good. Leave comments. And the more upvoted questions and answers you get, the more reputation you get. The bigger your reputation, the more people will respect you, I guess. This is kind of the currency of Skeptics Exchange. So I wanted to build a site where people could go and they could see if a question was answered by someone with a lot of reputation, they could be reasonably confident that was a good answer, and they could be confident of the information within it.
So initially, anybody can ask or answer questions?
Absolutely, anyone can go on, ask or answer a question. If it's a good answer, and by good I mean well-researched citations, much like Wikipedia do, then people will vote it up, or people will comment on it. If you've got enough reputation, you can actually edit other people's answers, so there's that kind of Wikipedia element there. I mean, Wikipedia is great, wikis are great. I'm a technologist, I love Wikipedia, but it's got some inherent problems which we wanted to solve. One being that any nutcase can get on and change your entry or hijack the site. And we see this with articles on Wikipedia. There's some articles which you just can't change. I mean, if I wanted to go and edit the homeopathy article, for instance, within about 3 seconds it would be changed back. So I wanted somewhere where you could only edit answers if you had the reputation. And to get that reputation, you have to give us good answers, or you have to ask good questions.
Perfect. How many people are answering questions right now?
So we launched at the start of November. We've got about 100 registered users, but we're getting thousands of page loads every day, mainly because people are asking great questions and giving great answers. We've got there's a H1N1 question on there at the moment, and somebody's gone on there and they've written an excellent post. It's very long, it's well researched, it cites numerous different sources from the BBC and medical journals. I mean, it's a great piece of information, it's a great starting place, and that comes really close to the top of Google when you search for questions about H1N1. And this is another thing that we wanted to do for Skeptics Exchange. We wanted to own some of those Google phrases. We wanted to own swine flu, for instance, and pregnancy and vaccinations, because we didn't want the other side to have all the control. Because the big problem with skeptics is there's people on the other side, they make money out of what they're doing. We don't make any money. There's no money in asking questions and looking for evidence. So we've got to own those, and the only way we can do that is be intelligent about how we have that information out there. So this is part of this sort of the ethos of Skeptics Exchange. We want to take some of that information that's buried on the deep web, behind forums and on mailing lists and what have you, and put it on Google and let people access it, but let people have good access to it, but also be able to contribute to it and not get it hijacked by people with an agenda.
I am definitely all about giving skeptics more ways to contribute. So are you recruiting people right now? Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're looking for moderators. I mean, we've only been going a month, so there's only there's a few people on there with sort of quite high reputations. They've asked some questions and answered some great questions, but we're actively looking for moderators. So you just need to log onto the site, sign up, start asking questions, start answering questions, voting things up, voting things down, because this is the currency. I mean, you have to, when people vote things up, that gives whoever they voted up currency, so then they can go and change other things and vote more people up or vote things down. When we've got a few months behind us and we know the people that contribute a lot and we can trust, then we'll start appointing moderators, and a moderator can do your general moderating thing. So we're always looking for people to get involved. And this is only in its infancy, but I was looking through the site, and there's fantastic questions and equally fantastic answers.
Absolutely,
so,
yeah.
Well done.
Thank you.
So
well, don't thank me. Thank the community. I mean, it's small, but it's growing, and we really want to get there. We want to own some of those Google phrases. When people put in answers on homeopathy, we want us to be, if not at the top, somewhere close, so people can get a good balance.
Agreed.
And we're happy for homeopaths to come on as well. They can put their case forward. I'm sure they won't get many upvotes unless obviously their evidence is good. But you know.
Perfect. Well, everybody, do take a look for yourself at the Skeptics Exchange. That's it's exchange.bristolskeptics.co.uk. And thanks very much for being here, Richard.
Thanks for having me, Desiree.
And if you out there have an event or a project or some other bit of skeptical goodness that you'd like to share, you too can appear on Speaking Up. Head to skepticallyspeaking.com and visit the Speaking Up page for more information. And we'll be right back with Kylie Sturgess and Dr. Martin Bridgstock and their new research into paranormal belief right after these messages.
You are listening to Skeptically Speaking, thanks to the wonder of podcast technology or the generosity of one of our rebroadcasting stations. Skeptically Speaking is broadcast live out of CJSR 88.5 Edmonton, Alberta at 6 p.m. Mountain Time every Friday. If you're not in Edmonton, you can still listen to the broadcast live in our Ustream.tv feed, which you can find by following the Listen Live link on our website at skepticallyspeaking.com. You can also participate in the chat room and submit questions. During the week leading up to each show, you can find information on the upcoming episode and guest, and submit a question to be asked on the air. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Our deepest thanks go to the stations that donate their valuable airtime to our program, including LP 99.1 FM in Madison, Wisconsin, Public Reality Radio WPRR 1680 AM in Grand Rapids, Michigan, Roslyn 101.1 in Roslyn, British Columbia, CJAI 92.1 Amherst Island Radio Broadcasting Inc., and on freethoughtradio.com. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Skeptically Speaking. I'm your host, Desiree Schell. We're on the line today with Dr. Martin Bridgstock and Kylie Sturgess to talk about paranormal belief and education. Now, Dr. Bridgstock is the author of Beyond Belief, Skepticism, Science, and the Paranormal, published in paperback in November by Cambridge University Press. He's a senior lecturer in the School of Biomolecular and Physical Sciences at Griffith University in Nathan, Queensland, Australia. He teaches courses on science, technology, and ethics, as well as a course called Skepticism, Science, and the Paranormal. Dr. Bridgstock has appeared at DragonCon and the Australian Skeptics National Convention, and his articles on the teaching of science and technology and the ethics of skeptical inquiry have been featured in Studies in Higher Education, Explorations in Knowledge, Scientometrics, Search, and Skeptical Inquirer. He's also won several teaching prizes and the Australian Skeptics Prize for Critical Thinking. And Kylie Sturgess is a writer, educator, blogger, and a fabulously thorough researcher. She's given presentations on skepticism and the paranormal at TAM, DragonCon, and the Australian Skeptics National Conference, and her articles on critical thinking and parapsychology have appeared in Critical and Creative Thinking, the Australian Skeptic, and the Journal of Science Teachers Association of Western Australia. Kylie has also won the Australian Skeptics Prize for Critical Thinking and contributes to interviews on the Skeptic Zone podcast. She's currently working on a dissertation on gender differences in paranormal and pseudoscientific beliefs and is employed as a research assistant on the issue of engagement in schools and will additionally be working as a philosophy and religious education teacher in 2010. Her writing on various skeptical topics is collected on her blog at podblack.com. Thanks very much for being here, both of you.
It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Desiree.
So you're both researchers and educators, and you're both teaching somewhat unusual courses. Let's start with yours, Martin. You teach a course on science and the paranormal. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, that's right. Yes, certainly. The course is called Skepticism, Science, and the Paranormal. Now, way back in 2001, I spent 5 months in hospital with a life-threatening disease. And while I lay there in hospital being bored out of my skull, I started to think about what courses would be A, valuable for students, and B, interesting for students. That is, students would want to do them, and they would also carry away something of value. Because quite often, as we know, students take courses simply in order to gain the credits, simply in order to gain the qualification. And I'd been a skeptic at that time for many years, and so I thought, well, why don't I really try something a little risky and try to put on a course in which I talk about the skeptical approaches to the paranormal. That is, asking what is the evidence for paranormal claims, and is the evidence for any paranormal claims strong enough for us to accept it? And so I got out of hospital, and after recovering, I wrote a course outline, which you have to have at Griffith University, and I submitted it in fear and trembling for it to go through all the different committees in the university. And I waited for the thunderbolts to descend on my head, and to my amazement, nothing did. It was approved by every single committee, except that one person said, why did I spell skepticism with a K? Apart from that, it went straight through, and the next year I started the course. And the idea of the course, above all, is that I don't tell students what to believe. I think if there's one thing that young people hate above anything else, is being told what to believe. And quite often you do find academics who do that. I don't. What I do in the course is I introduce them to a set of intellectual skills which enable people to evaluate paranormal claims. And I then ask them to understand those skills and to be able to demonstrate that they can apply them. And if they do that, they pass the course. Their beliefs are completely their own business.
Right.
And go on.
No, continue.
Okay, thank you. I just thought you were going to say something. Okay, and I've found that's a great success. I've stressed it right from the very beginning. Now, this is a completely elective course. Nobody absolutely has to do it, and yet the numbers have grown and grown. Now it gets 2 or 3 times as many students as does an average course of its kind. The evaluations I get are absolutely terrific. One student just wrote on an anonymous evaluation sheet, "Martin, you destroyed my fantasy world." Sorry, didn't mean to do that. And I've also done before and after studies where I ask people what they believe in the paranormal before and after the course. Now, that's not the aim of the course. The aim is to get them thinking in this disciplined way. Their beliefs are their own business. But I've found that, roughly speaking, it cuts paranormal belief in half.
Brilliant.
The number of people who believe in various paranormal phenomena drops to about half by the end of the course.
Now, those of us who live in Canada will have a chance to take this course as well quite soon.
That is a possibility, yes. That's not guaranteed. There is an awful lot of bureaucracy to go through. But what I found was Griffith is a strange university because it's spread across about 6 campuses. And the one I'm at is not the largest campus. And so many students can't do the course. Even students on my campus sometimes can't do the course because they get clashes between courses that they have to do for their degree and my course. So what I've done is, over about 18 months, I've recorded on DVD 32 little lectures. They vary from about 8 minutes to 32 minutes in length, which summarize the basis of the course. And then with a study guide and with the book, they're going to be able to take the course without ever necessarily seeing the campus. Now, in principle, anybody should be able to do that course. Whether or not it will actually get to that stage, I don't know. The university bureaucracy is sort of looking at this with a kind of amazement. What on earth is he doing? This is nothing like anything else. But that's the idea behind it. I'm always a little bit worried about courses which students can undertake completely on their own. I think it's a great advantage to be able to talk to people face to face. But I'm hoping that the interest of the course will be enough to carry people through it and they'll benefit from it.
Now, Kylie, you also have had an interesting teaching experience. You've been at a girls' school for 7 years.
Yes, I was formerly teaching at Methodist Ladies College, which is an inner city school here in Perth, where I was helping my students do investigations of paranormal and pseudoscientific beliefs in an English class situation. What we did was incorporated the concepts as non-fiction writing and also as a speaking task. So they were studying expository writing, and it just so happened that the topics we investigate were paranormal and pseudoscientific beliefs. And that was going on for about 2 years. We went from 2006 to 2007. At the end of 2007, I had to choose between whether or not I wanted to continue being a teacher or finish off my master's thesis. And I'm afraid the thesis won. It wasn't really fair on the students to continue to hightail it down the road in order to get to university classes whilst being a full-time teacher. So at the end of that, I ended up contributing a lot of the material and a lot of the ideas, the textbooks and articles to a new course which was being developed. And that course was Philosophy and Ethics, which began here in Western Australia. The course was the 2A course called Reason and Persons, and there's a heavy amount of skepticism and looking at critical thinking within that unit, and it covers over into several of the other upper school units, which involve Year 11 and Year 12. This year, I'm continuing on as a research assistant, but next year I'll be drawing upon those resources again for a different girls' school, where I'll be teaching the course that I contributed to. So I'll be teaching Philosophy and Ethics, and I'll also be teaching Religion and Philosophy Studies, which is a variation on religious education studies.
Now that's very fascinating.
Very much like Martin. I share the philosophy of it's not about what to believe. And I know that I myself and many young people hate being told what to believe. The idea is to investigate. So that will be carried on through in both teaching philosophy and ethics and religious education studies.
Now, I realize now, being an atheist, does that make it difficult to teach a religion course?
No.
Not at all. That was a very succinct answer. Are you worried that you're accidentally going to say something snarky? Because I do read your blog, and there is occasional snark.
Well, it's different when you're talking to students. The blog is my arena. The blog is my venue. I'm considering perhaps starting up another blog elsewhere where I will investigate some of the concepts and ideas in class. Using blogs in education isn't unknown. There's quite a few sites and opportunities out there for teachers to network and get material out there. I imagine that I will have a similar situation to the person who I'm replacing. I, in fact, discussed it with her. What was it like talking to parents as a teacher of religious education studies? She said she had the occasional parent who came up and said, "Oh, my daughter's interested in seeking confirmation. Do you have any advice about what she could do?" And the teacher's response was, "That's not my job. See the school chaplain. That's his prerogative to give you advice in that regard."
Interesting.
And I imagine I'll just continue on in that approach. I know that the likes of Richard Dawkins has a lot to say about faith schools and indoctrination, and I guess my response is, if you're that concerned about it and that involved in it, then why not get into the system as someone who is a member of the community, who is an educator and is qualified, in order to see for yourself and see what sort of bridges can be built, because quite frankly, I think there can be.
Now, audience, if you are listening live, the phone lines are open at 780-492-2577, extension 1. You can also email us at live@skepticallyspeaking.com or tweet us at skepticalradio. And if you're listening online via Ustream right now, you can discuss the show in the chat room.
Richard Dawkins better not phone in. I'll be too scared.
So now you both got together and conducted a survey that looked at how widespread paranormal beliefs are in Australia.
Not in Australia, in one particular state of Australia, the notorious state of Queensland.
And why notorious?
Well, about 25 years ago, Queensland had a terrible reputation in Australia. It was regarded as being the hick state, and it was also the state where weird beliefs blossomed. But about 25 years ago, Queensland had a conservative, a fundamentalist Premier, a fundamentalist leader of the opposition, and a fundamentalist Minister of Education. And there was a vigorous push to push creation science into the Queensland science syllabus. That is, to make this quite clear, it meant that the account of origins in the book of Genesis would be taught in science lessons in Queensland. In addition, Queensland had a bad reputation because there were fake cancer cures, which the government apparently took seriously, and there was also a hydrogen-powered car that one gentleman claimed to have invented, whereby you poured water into the petrol tank and it went. This was never proven. So Queensland was regarded as being a very strange state indeed. So Queensland was rather notorious among the other Australian states for all these strange beliefs. And so Kylie and I were very interested to find out, well, what do Queenslanders really think? Now, there is in Australia an organisation called the Skeptical Foundation, which does have some money, and it can give out money in order to help worthwhile skeptical projects. And so we asked them if we could have some money to put some questions on a survey of Queensland and to see what Queenslanders really thought about these things. I mean, as you probably know, Desiree, in the United States, a majority of the population favours creation over evolution as an explanation of how we came to be here. And we wanted to know whether there were similar results in Queensland. And so late in 2008, our 20 questions about beliefs in creation science and other aspects of the paranormal and various other beliefs went onto this survey, and the surveyors began telephoning people at random in the state of Queensland. And apparently they got all kinds of reactions of pure astonishment when people realised they were being asked about paranormal beliefs. But when the results came out and when we began to analyse them, then the real surprise came through. Because in summary, and it's a bit more complicated than this, but in summary, what we found was that 62% of Queenslanders believe in evolution and 38% of them believe in creation. In short, there is only a minority of Queenslanders who believe in creation. It's about as popular as the belief in ghosts, which is 36%, and somewhat less popular than the beliefs in psychic and spiritual healing, which is over a half. So what was happening in Queensland was not, as in parts of the United States, that there was a mass movement supporting creation science, but the particular group of politicians had got into power and they were pushing it, and they alone. Queensland, in its general opinions, is not particularly strange. It was just particular groups who were doing it. So we then heaved a huge sigh of relief as a first step.
Well, how did you choose what kind of beliefs to ask about in the survey?
With great difficulty. Kylie and I are on opposite sides of the Australian continent, and the internet ran hot with messages zooming backwards and forwards. There were some we were obviously going to ask about. We were going to ask about creation, obviously, and about evolution. We also asked about another scientific theory, continental drift. We asked about a range of other paranormal beliefs, such as ghosts, such as psychic and spiritual healing. Kylie was particularly interested in conspiracy theories, so we asked a couple of interesting questions on that. And we also put in a couple of short sets of questions which tested superstitions. Richard Wiseman and Caroline Watt, who are two British researchers, have got a theory that there are two different kinds of superstition. So we put in some questions about those as well. And right up to the last minute, there were all these messages zooming backwards and forwards across Australia as we tried to work out what the heck we were going to ask. And then at the very last minute, a high-ranking person in the Skeptical Foundation started to come in with his own ideas about the questions, right at the very minute when we were fixing the questions. And so we simply couldn't accept those because we didn't have time to test them out properly.
Right.
So it was a very chaotic process. But I think we're both quite happy with the set of questions we got.
Absolutely. And people want to hear the lecture that Dr. Martin Bridgstock and I presented at DragonCon. Check out skepticzone.tv, and it's episode 47, and you can hear us throughout the entire presentation profusely thanking Richard Saunders, who is a member of the Australian Skeptics, for being a part of the project in terms of helping us out.
Well, Kylie, you guys were extremely specific in the way you worded the questions about the beliefs.
Yes. By drawing on previous scales, it was of great help in terms of brainstorming and thinking exactly what is being asked of the participants. And, of course, there's always room for improvement. Just at the last Brisbane convention, Martin and I were talking about the possibility of clarifying a future survey perhaps, and certainly things that can be improved with surveys as they stand now, because you never know how people are going to just precisely interpret something. The ones that particularly intrigued me were the ones, not only the conspiracy theory ones, but one that springs to mind is the use of technology in psychic reading. There are some people out there who use mobile phones, or at least they encourage you to use mobile phones in a psychic reading context. Type in your name, type in his name, and we'll tell you whether or not you are destined to be with one another. Or type in this particular fact and we'll give you an accurate reading. Just how many people are falling for it, really, or being drawn into it. And surprisingly, it did not rate particularly highly. And although I know that it is being advertised out there, I questioned myself about the wording of the question, because it was one that I was particularly intrigued by, and whether or not I could have maybe worded it slightly differently in order to better ascertain what people believe in terms of the use of technology, and not only phones but the internet, in understanding people's belief in psychic readings.
Can I come in for a moment there, please, Desiree?
Please do.
Kylie's dead right. There's just one point I want to stress for all the listeners. These questions, and we had 20 questions, cost $1,500 each to put on this survey, and an Australian dollar's worth roughly the same as a Canadian dollar. So we wanted to make sure that the Skeptic Foundation's money was not being wasted. Now, one danger, if you ask questions, is that people won't understand them. And so you'll get answers which are nonsense because people won't fully understand the question that they're being asked. Another danger is that they will understand the questions in slightly different ways. And in that case, you're getting a mishmash of several different questions that people have understood altogether. The answers won't make sense again. A third danger, and we nearly ran into this with one or two of the questions, is that everybody gives the same answer. Because if everybody gives the same answer to a question, okay, you've learned that everybody thinks the same way about this. But what you don't know is why people answer differently. You can't then link in the answer to some questions to the answers to other questions. So really posing questions and trying to get them just as good as you can is both an art and a science, and it's something you've really got to be able to do.
So were there any characteristics or set of characteristics that correlated strongly with paranormal belief or any specific belief?
We're looking at this in great detail, and it's amazingly complicated. Mm-hmm. There's a few obvious things. Women are more likely to believe some paranormal beliefs than men. Men are more likely to believe some others than women. There are differences there. On average, and I stress on average here, more educated people tend to believe many paranormal beliefs less, though that's not absolutely 100%. Another quite complex one that I'm looking at now in detail is that the relationship between religious beliefs and paranormal beliefs. Mm-hmm. And there's an American sociologist called Alan Orenstein who's been researching this. And what it looks like is that when people have an ordinary religious belief, they just hold it as part of their lives, then they are more likely than non-believers to believe in the paranormal. But when they have a very strong belief that dominates their lives, the really religious committed people, then they are less likely to believe in other paranormal beliefs, because the strength and the comprehensiveness of the religious belief, if you like, crowds all the other beliefs out of their consciousness. So it's quite a complicated relationship.
Now, Kylie, did the gender correlations fit with the previous research that you've done on gender and the paranormal?
In general, yes. You will find, as Martin has said, a slight tendency of women to endorse particular aspects more than men. So astrology, ESP, New Age beliefs, psychic healing, they're more likely to be what we call women beliefs. But, of course, it varies across the surveys that you do. In our case, yes, it was tending that way. Men, UFO and aliens, absolutely, more likely to endorse there. And there's a variety of theories about why these sorts of beliefs are being endorsed, and they are still being investigated.
Again, audience, if you are listening live, do call in with your questions at 780-492-2577, extension 1. You can email us at live@skepticallyspeaking.com, or if you're on Twitter, we're at Skeptical Radio. Now, we had a question submitted via the website, and I love it. It says, how does belief in the paranormal relate to voting preference? Is the stereotypical view of the alt-health, organic food, anti-nuclear lefty correct? What about the creationist right wing?
Oh, we do. It's a beautifully put question. It's almost like a little poem in the form of a question, isn't it? We have got some questions about political belief on other parts of the survey. There is no particularly strong or obvious correlation. It's not a very powerful one compared to the other sorts of correlations that I've been talking about. There used to be a tradition in Queensland that the National Party, which was the dominant party 25 years ago, was more associated with paranormal beliefs. It's not a very strong link. I don't think that a person's overall political philosophy, whether they're politically left-wing or politically right-wing, has anything to do necessarily with their paranormal beliefs. I think it is possible that other parts of their sort of philosophy of life, vegetarianism, tree hugging and so on, might possibly have a link. We may be able to explore some of those. It's an interesting question.
So overall, would you say that the results of the study were what you were expecting?
I was expecting to find, Kylie will speak for herself in a moment, I'm sure. Yep. I was expecting to find a massive belief in creationism in Queensland and a well above average belief in other aspects of the paranormal. I'm not finding that. I was really quite startled. It shows how a small politically dominant group can distort the image of a state. Queensland's general outlook is very similar to that of other Australian states, and I dare say to both Canada and the United States. That really surprised me. It also delighted me, I hasten to add.
Kylie?
Yes, absolutely, because even though I'm on the other side of the country, as a person growing up in the 1980s, I'm afraid Queensland was a bit of a laughing stock.
Yes.
And sorry, Martin. And
it's all right.
You should have immigrated over here, for heaven's sakes. Anyway, And there were even television programs, continual news broadcasts about what was happening in the state of Queensland and how bad the political situation was. And so to discover those results was just as surprising as it was to Martin, I suspect. One of the things that did get to me was finding the element of education. In a way, it sort of says to me, in order to challenge and question pseudoscientific and paranormal beliefs, it's a matter of use it or lose it. You have to hopefully continue on educating people in order to have people reflect upon and perhaps change their mind on these things. And I guess that's something for future studies as well.
Can I come in with one more point?
Mm-hmm.
Kylie, by the way, I know it looked funny when the antics of Queensland in the 1980s. Believe me, when you were in it, it wasn't funny. It was absolutely terrifying. It really was.
I can imagine. Yeah, because it was police corruption, so much more going on. Yes,
that's right. It really was frightening. One thing which did surprise us that we haven't mentioned so far, Desiree, I mentioned early on that we incorporated a couple of different scales of superstitiousness that a couple of well-known researchers had devised, Wiseman and Watt. We've been rather surprised to find that those scales don't appear to hang together the way they expect to. It looks as though we're going to have to write a paper which says, look, these scales don't work properly. And that's something which you just have to do as part of your research work.
I'm very, very excited about that because it demonstrates that the science behind this is moving forwards. We're going to help contribute and hopefully improve an understanding of this subject for future generations.
Yes.
Now, I think on that note is a wonderful time to go to a wee break. We'll be right back with more of Dr. Martin Bridgstock and Kylie Sturgess right after this. Next week on Skeptically Speaking, we'll be talking to Mark McKenzie about radiation. Does that word conjure up thoughts of Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, or bad science fiction? Or does it make you think of X-rays, cancer treatments, or sustainable energy? Radiation can be good for you, but how much is too much? Tune in next week to Skeptically Speaking, every Friday at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, here on CJSR. Welcome back to Skeptically Speaking. I'm your host, Desiree Schell. And just something to add to that ad. If you can't listen live every week, but you have a question about the topic, please do submit it via the website. We wouldn't want you to miss out on asking what I can only presume would be a wonderfully insightful question, just because you have other things to do on a Friday night. But if you're listening live right now, of course, you can call us at 780-492-2577, extension 1. You can email us at live@skepticallyspeaking.com or tweet us at skepticalradio. And we have an email.
Did you find widespread belief in any interesting, uniquely Australian conspiracy theories?
Kylie, you know more about this than me.
Okay, uniquely Australian. Well, the ones that we chose for conspiracy theories involved the 9/11 conspiracy theories, so I'm afraid that's not uniquely Australian. Whether the idea of AIDS, HIV, being created in a laboratory, well, I'm afraid that's an international conspiracy theory belief as well.
Absolutely.
And whether or not the government is controlling gun control, or we should be suspicious of those who wish to control our access to guns, I'm afraid that's not particularly Australian either. However, it was interesting to see how people in Queensland responded to those questions. And there was a bit of variation there, but I suspect if we gave those questions to different populations, it would vary again. With the ones regarding 9/11 conspiracy theories, research that I've done, and there's quite a bit of ongoing research. We've had enough time after the tragedy of 9/11 to look back and see how beliefs have been formed over time. They are starting to drop, is one idea that I would hazard. And certainly if you listen to the very first episode of the Skeptic Zone podcast and an interview with Mark Gravy-Roberts by Dr. Mark Henn, you'll find that he reflects upon what he sees as a popular culture sort of degradation of whether or not it was a conspiracy by the government to let the Twin Towers fall, or whether it was, as we put in the question, just a combination of the planes hitting the buildings and the ensuing fires.
Yeah, can I just give a quick reaction? When we started to do this survey, and when we told other skeptics we were going to do it, one reaction I got was, well, what you're going to find is that those Americans and United States people have had the most surveys done. They have all kinds of funny ideas, but we down-to-earth Australians will have many few of them. And it's actually not true. With the probable exception of creation science, there's really very little difference between paranormal beliefs between Australians and United States people. And that, I think, came as another surprise.
I believe we have another question.
It was actually exactly that.
Oh, okay.
Beliefs change the country.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you, Sender. So now that we know what the situation is in Queensland, is that something that is depressing or makes you optimistic? You, Martin, sound like you're very hopeful after this survey.
Well, I think, yeah. I mean, the creationism result, the fact that creationism does not have majority support in Queensland, it's very much the same as support for other popular beliefs. I think that's very encouraging, and it means that science in Queensland is not going to be under terrible attack by a very large fundamentalist majority. The other ones are pretty much what other polls had suggested. Optimism and pessimism. I'm speaking as a skeptic here. I think that all paranormal beliefs ought to be questioned and investigated. And if some of them turn out to be true, it's going to be fantastically important. If clairvoyance can actually foretell the future, or if we can exert telepathy and transfer thoughts directly from one mind to another, it's fabulously important, and we need to know. So all of these beliefs ought to be investigated. Now, the likelihood is that most of them will be shown to be completely unsupported by evidence once they're properly studied. So the next stage, therefore, is to give many, many people skeptical skills, educate people as far as we can, so that they can make up their own minds. I don't directly want to start saying influencing people's beliefs. I want to give them the intellectual skills so they can go out and evaluate these things for themselves.
Well, that being said, will this survey make you change your teaching style at all? Or will you change anything about your curriculum?
I'm constantly fiddling and tweaking with my curriculum. Every year I get evaluation forms and I change it. I will certainly be building these results in. The problem is that students do not have the same profile of beliefs as the general population. About 80% of the general population has at least one paranormal belief. It's about 60% of the students that I teach. So it's markedly less, and the distribution of beliefs is also somewhat less as well. Fewer of them believe in creation, probably at least as many believe in UFOs and ESP. So it's a different profile of beliefs. And when I'm thinking about which beliefs to address, I tend much more to look at the feedback I get from students rather than the feedback from this study. Where I will be using this study is to show what the general population thinks, to show students that these beliefs are very widespread. They could be very important if they're true. They can have disastrous effects if they're false, and therefore it's important to be able to evaluate them critically.
I'd absolutely agree with that, and certainly the importance of education is not only about throwing resources at people and thinking, oh, we have this book, we have this lecture, that will solve this, or even we have a website, end of story. It's about continual scaffolding. It's about supporting and creating an environment where questioning can be done in an unthreatening fashion, in an opportunity to allow people of all ages an opportunity to work it through for themselves, because people are very much invested in these beliefs. You'll find a variety of factors that will lead people to say, this is what I believe. And so understanding these and accepting that people will come from a variety of different circumstances to become so invested is important. And that's why education is so vital in terms of understanding that people are quite unique in a variety of ways and they need to be supported in understanding themselves.
Well, one of the things that I was wondering before the show is you've found that unsupported beliefs are not necessarily related, which is something that we have traditionally thought. So would you respond differently when you're analyzing specific beliefs now?
Ooh. That's a Martin topic. Yeah.
Do you want to run with it, Kylie, or shall I? I've got a few thoughts. Okay.
You've got to think. I'll let you gather your thoughts, and I'll come up immediately. It's one of the things that my master's degree is looking at, about whether or not you can see differences between the different clusters of beliefs. And I imagine this will be something that will be further clarified in a future scale. And certainly people do come to their beliefs in different ways. I mean, all of us can have a conversation with someone where they'll say, oh, I'm a skeptic. I don't believe this, and this. And yet my mother's a psychic, and this is a family tradition. And we have a history of generations of all of us believing these things. We are not John Edward. We do not go out and make a profit from this. This is just something that is a family trait. And we do not believe in the commercialization of psychics. And this is just something that is part of us. So yes, you are going to see differences in paranormal beliefs and pseudoscientific beliefs and how people endorse them.
Martin?
Oh, yes. The question about whether you can say that paranormal beliefs fall on one scale so that a person is highly likely to believe them or not, or whether there are several different scales which don't relate to each other, is one of these great fraught areas, and psychologists and statisticians are fighting and arguing. There's dozens of papers being written on this, and the answer is we don't really know. We know, for instance, that creation science, belief in creation science, tends to be different from other beliefs. There's a cluster of beliefs concerned, many people believe that the human mind has capacities that we don't fully acknowledge at the moment, such as telepathy, such as clairvoyance. There is another cluster of beliefs concerned with alien civilizations, UFOs, ancient astronauts, alien abductions, and so on. But these clusters are all a bit vague, and they tend to overlap. And so you can get into an endless argument about whether there's a single belief or not. My attitude is a very simple one. I'm very simple-minded here. I think that a skeptical view which says, okay, what's the evidence for any of these beliefs, and is the evidence sufficient to convince a reasonable person that this amazing claim is true, actually applies to all of them. So I tend to come at it from a skeptical position, and I don't worry too much about which beliefs correlate in which way. Sorry, I'm a bit simple-minded.
No, and well, this is what I'm wondering. If there are different motivations for the different beliefs, does that change the way that you educate about them?
I can answer that. Yeah, it doesn't change the way I educate them, but I know the results are different. The last survey I did of students, belief in clairvoyance before and after the course dropped from 30% before to 0 after. At the end of the course, nobody believed in clairvoyance. Belief in astrology also dropped, I think, from something like 30% to about 5%. I think because these are casual beliefs, they're not really an integral part of people's lives. And therefore, if you just indicate to people, okay, what is the evidence for these beliefs? Think about it for yourself. How convincing is the evidence? Quite often they just say, oh, well, perhaps I don't believe it. On the other hand, at the other extreme, you have creation science. Now, if you believe in creationism, you are in fact a Christian fundamentalist normally, and your belief on creation is closely integrated with your fundamentalist Christian views, and you also believe that if you stop believing in this way, then you are going to go to hell. So there's a tremendous motivation to continue believing it, and therefore that belief is very strongly entrenched in a person's entire worldview. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I can't treat them differently because I'm trying to change their beliefs, because I'm genuinely not. What I will do is to say, okay, here is a skeptical approach. Here is how it applies to various paranormal beliefs. What you do with it once you finish this course is up to you. But I do know that it has differential effects on differential beliefs.
Yeah. Certainly, like the example I gave, factors like, oh, you're right, Martin, your mobile phone has gone off. I'll talk over it. Ethnicity, nationality, culture-specific factors. You can find an excellent book which I've investigated in order to find out more about the scales, called The Psychology of Paranormal Belief by Harvey J. Irwin. And that gives you an idea of just how many different views there are about how paranormal scales measure these things.
Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up as well is sort of talking about outreach efforts. I'm thinking specifically of the whole atheist versus skeptic debate. So if religious belief comes from a different place than, say, maybe belief in UFOs, does that hamper our outreach when we put them in the same category?
It could do. I'm still thinking about this relationship between skepticism and atheism. My provisional conclusion is that they're not necessarily exactly the same thing. And there are circumstances in which putting the two together can actually damage the skeptical effort. The obvious thing was back in Queensland in the 1980s when we were fighting furiously against the creation scientists, who were on the verge of winning, I might add. And it was a tremendous boost to the small group of skeptics there that the major churches, all of them, came out against creation science. They all said this is nonsense, this is a religious aberration, this has no claim to be science, and it's not even good theology. And that meant that we had some tremendous allies. And in fact, we did quite consciously pitch our appeal so that it was acceptable to religious people. And if we'd allowed the creationists to pose the battle as being a battle between Christianity and atheism, we would probably have lost. As it was, we were able to paint the creationists for what they truly were, which was a small group of extreme fundamentalists who were actually trying to get their particular religious views privileged over other religious views by pretending that they were science. So I'm not comfortable with simply pushing the two together and saying they're the same, but I haven't yet fully nutted out exactly what the similarities and differences are.
Right. Kylie?
I have an article which you can find on the Skeptical Inquirer website called The Deus Skeptic, Not a Contradiction. And that pretty much says it all there.
Do you want to give us a brief overview?
The Deus Skeptic, Not a Contradiction is an interview with Dr. Mark Henn, who had religious experiences as a younger person and is now a professor of psychology at the University of New Hampshire. And he and I essentially have a discussion about how people will grow towards becoming a skeptic, about how people like Dr. Karl Krasnitsky here in Australia believes that religious belief and science are orthogonal. He has examples of scientists who allow the science to be the science. Of course, it isn't, unfortunately, that easy. Science and religion aren't always orthogonal. They do intersect on occasion, and you will get conflicts, of course. And yet, just like Julius Sweeney, people can wear two hats, and they may grow towards an understanding the world as a skeptic, and may continue on to hold on to their beliefs in God in one way or another throughout the journey. And some may never let it go. And I don't see that really as a problem, quite frankly.
Nicely put.
Oh, I'm glad. I always feel like I'm never quite as erudite as Martin. I'm like, oh, I hope I'm not going to contradict him by saying this because, I think there needs to be more studies in this regard, and I hope to work with Martin on investigating it further. Certainly presenting at the future Global Atheist Conference in Melbourne. That will be happening in March next year. That will enable me to talk to more people and certainly hear some more views on the matter. I certainly hope to be challenged and continue to question. That's always something I aim to do with everything I do, really.
And hopefully,
Kylie, if you want to contradict me, feel free to do so. That's what colleagues are for.
Yes, let's have a fight on a radio station. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
I wish we had ratings, because that would help. Martin, you just published a book, and it's,
yes.
I read through quite a bit of it. I'm not quite done. I only just received it in the mail, because the post hates me, apparently. But it's a bit of a toolkit, really. Can you sort of give us the 1-minute overview?
Sure, yes. Look, the book, like my course, doesn't set out to tell people what to believe. What it sets out to do is, first of all, to give people some intellectual tools which are valuable in thinking about paranormal claims. First of all, there's the burden of proof. If somebody makes an amazing claim, a reasonable response is to say to them, okay, what evidence have you got for that claim? Because it's an amazing claim, it contradicts what we know about how the universe works, therefore it's incumbent on you to produce the evidence, and I will decline to believe it until you've produced that evidence. A second tool is Occam's razor. Occam's razor is simply the postulate that the simplest explanation is normally the best one. And when you're dealing with paranormal claims, since virtually any paranormal claim presupposes entire new regions of reality that we don't know anything about. Any natural explanation is always better than a paranormal explanation because it's more economical. And thirdly, there's Sagan's balance, named after the late great Carl Sagan. And the idea here is that if somebody makes an amazing claim, such as that a faith healer can heal them, then the evidence has got to be very, very strong, because that contradicts what we know about the nature of the universe. It's not automatically wrong, but the evidence has to be sufficiently strong so that we would believe an amazing claim. So there's those three basic ideas. And if you start thinking with those ideas, you find that your whole perspective on the world changes. The other thing I argue in the book is from an ethical point of view, that not only is skepticism interesting and it's fun, but that also it's ethically right, in that some of these paranormal beliefs can have disastrous effects if people accept them. And therefore it is ethically right, it eases human suffering if we adopt a skeptical approach and demand the evidence appropriate to believing in these amazing claims. I think that was a little more than a bit.
No, that was well done.
I'd like to add that this is something that the Skeptic Zone podcast are very keen on. Episode 58, we investigate Choice Magazine and talk to Christopher Zinn, who is from Choice Magazine. I guess it's the equivalent to many of the consumer rights organizations out there, the not-for-profit ones that you can find all over the world. And we question whether or not we might be able to get more unity in terms of understanding how particular beliefs and particular practices do challenge your consumer rights. And we like to see ourselves as a group that certainly supports that sort of goal, I guess.
Kylie, where's your book? Why don't you have a book?
My book? Dude, I'm doing everything. I've got a thesis to finish. If you do want books, there should be 2 books coming out. One is the book of transcripts from the Skeptic Zone podcast. That shouldn't be very far away. Depends how much time I get over this December break to really get my nose down and finish it off, along with the rest of the Skeptic Zone team, who are incredibly supportive and fabulous in terms of getting amazing interviews from around the world. The other thing I must mention is the blog anthology by the Young Australian Skeptics. They have a fantastic podcast of their own called the Pseudoscientists, and they have been getting blog entries from around the world, excellent ideas and investigations on a variety of topics, and that will be their project that I'm helping out with. And the Skeptical blog anthology is inspired by the Open Laboratory blog anthology, which has been created by Bora of Science Blogs, and definitely get a copy of that as well when it's out. So, yeah, they're more sort of collaborative projects, but they're things that we're getting out there.
This is one of those episodes where I wish I had a 2-hour time slot, because we are out, people. Thank you so much, Martin Bridgstock and Kylie Sturgess, for being here today.
Great talking to you, Desiree.
Fantastic talking to you. Thank you so much.
Now go pick up Martin's book, Beyond Belief, Skepticism, Science, and the Paranormal. And until Kylie publishes a book, you can find her writing at podblack.com. And I wish I could take classes from both of you. You can find us, our website, at skepticallyspeaking.com, links to the Facebook page, Twitter stream, etc., etc. Subscribe to us on iTunes. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week on Skeptically Speaking.
South America does not exist. The moon is painted on the sky. Things sometimes fall up, but you never see. And everything you believe is a lie.
Dinosaurs were invented by God as a test. Our bodies don't rot when we die. Oh, the hippies are working for the government, and everything you believe is a lie. Everything you believe is a There are we, tiny dwarfs, inside your TV.
And nobody